I was thrilled when Ryan asked me to be a part of this issue. I've respected Borderlands for a long time, and I have to say, after hearing the poetry today, I'm even more excited to take it home and read it. So thank you, and I'm glad we're all here to celebrate it. So I'm going to read the first 4 pages of the poem in Borderlands. It's a longer piece, as you would imagine, from the 4 pages. And it's an allegory. It's called The Immaculate Conception of Loneliness. And so if you think of sort of old medieval allegories where ideas or qualities actually end up being flesh and blood people, I was really interested in that. If you've ever read either Pilgrim's Progress or Romance of the Rose, they're really boring, and so that's not the part that I was trying to imitate. But I was interested in what would happen if you took some of the things that you were grappling with and made them a character alongside someone. I don't think you need to know this, but just I'll remind you, if anybody's read Don Quixote, or if you haven't read it in a while, he thinks that he's a knight, and he just sort of overlays that story on everything that he does. So he sees windmills, and he starts jousting them as if they are other knights, and he meets a prostitute, and he treats her like a damsel in distress. And this continues for a very long book until the end, when he's getting ready to die, and he's talking to a priest, and he's sort of acknowledging that none of that was true, which I think is beautiful and sad. And then if you haven't been thinking a lot about the history of Immaculate Conception in mythology and religion, in Greek mythology, Zeus, who's the head honcho god, keeps coming down and impregnating people in the form of like a stream of light or an angry swan. And then, of course, in Christian mythology, in Christianity, the angel announces. And Mary is usually reading. Okay. The Immaculate Conception of Loneliness. I once was the marrying kind. Had you known me then, I would seem to you now skeletal but pure. Moving out in midwinter, I left my husband everything that had made me warm, except the strangers, the whiskey, and the bed of a truck. Day, night, day. Bodies create no friction like the stars, but every night in bed I was chafed into being. I ended up pregnant with the twins of desire. When I sang to my belly, I pictured the first child, absence, turning its ear towards me, curled into song. But longing was the stronger twin, stole nutrients, filled my womb until absence was just a ghost on the ultrasound. The doctor chastised me for not coming sooner, but still he smiled at the squirming, beating thing. For half a year, longing kicked all night, kicked my body sore with its knocking. Though I carried it full term, nothing to deliver. The doctor offered his best assistance, and then his best apology. For being filled with nothing, I was surprised at the dull ache, and took what he offered gladly. When the time came to fill out the forms, I could hardly remember the man's name, much less his hands. I shuttered the windows of my house. I stopped going to the bars. Ash from the fires elsewhere turned the sky to rust. Rust at dawn, rust fading down each night. June, bees or a form of gladness, grass or a type of exhaustion. I thought the body was a practical joke, gag based on mystery, one-liners the doctors scripted in their codes, which is to say, I thought the second time a mistake. The doctor's congratulations, my protest. I had slept accidentally under no shower of gold light, coupled with no swan, seen nothing winged but bees and wasps. I had become, in response to the world, deeply practical. But there I was, clothed in thin white paper, while the doctor took notes with fat, square hands. I go back to find the father of loneliness, but even the calendar leaves no clues. The doctor asks, when are you most fertile for sorrow? Didn't I shed it each month, each year? When I became a woman, I put away childish things. I once was a sponge, now am a catapult. Yes, loneliness grew in me. For weeks, the doctor passed me from machine to machine, beginning with the still needle of a polygraph, ending with blood in a vial. Proving that thing to be for once something wholly mine, sui generis, no accident or immortal donor. The city slides into night. So what, the sea once moved through me. I asked the doctor, is Don Quixote more alone when he is mad, but believes the world in concert with his madness, or at the end, when he knows death approaches and confesses to the priest his delusions? If you are looking for some halo in this story, I give you only the doctor, whispering into the phone, the shine of plastic gold behind his head, the blinding TV spots. Miracles fetch a good price. The trucks delivered the drums of water each day. By night, I had emptied a small aquarium. The empty jugs formed a sea of blue in my yard. I swelled. The stairs began to escalate. It was hard to compare myself to other pregnant women, since I couldn't fit whole into any mirror I found. I realized my dreams had been stupid and small, less the world, less the walking over a threshold into a stranger's earth. At the grocery store, I was suffused by the eyes of other women, also many men. Men as never before. Calls in the middle of the night, howls at my window. But being entire, they held nothing. My axe hung our yearly deer from a tree. The arched neck, the head lolling, and those cloudy globes that fixed me through the windows. I put mothballs in every closet, sage in every drawer. Some days I didn't leave the house, just sat, watched to see if I could detect myself growing, being made rock, like being carved from the slow accumulation of days. History, if able to be made beautiful, must be, I thought, the thing that gives us form. To receive, to pray. God and a video camera and an eye above the door were one. I cared for no reflection, not in the other people, not in the shadowed gray of the one-way mirror. I shed the thinking thing. So I'll stop there. So if you want to know what happens, you have to get the issue. And I would say that only in a poetry crowd would I shed the thinking thing possibly be a cliffhanger. Only still isn't. But all right, so I'll move on to the book. So also an allegory. So the narrator has left her life to go on a road trip across the American Southwest with failure. And again, failure is a person, but he is also the thing that perpetrates failure upon all of our lives, upon America. He's the agent of climate change, which ends up being a large part of the book. And so I'll talk a little bit about him throughout. And you don't really exactly know why the narrator has left, but over the course of this road trip, she ends up falling in love with failure. And at some point, they pick up a hitchhiker who it turns out is her ex, who is a corpse named Corpse. And so he'll make little appearances here and there. And I tried, because it felt like a Saturday afternoon is a good time to tell stories, so I tried to pick out some of the stories in the book. What it used to be like. Every rabbit in a field brought me luck. Every rabbit arrived at my door with a basket of luck, extended in their little furry paws. I invited them in and took their wooden baskets. I sat them down. Then I skinned each one for a coat, studded with their lucky feet, studded with the paws they used to bring me luck in. That's obviously the funny poem in the book. So as I was writing more and more about failure, I learned a lot of things about him, and one of the things that I learned was that he was kind of a trickster, and also that he was protean, that he could turn into a lot of things at will. And because he was kind of the repository of all of these failures, he had all of these stories in him. And so he and the narrator spend a lot of their time on the road trading stories back and forth, so I'll read a few of those. We navigate the river of tar under that tethered balloon of light. Listen, Failure's skin was a sheet stretched to be a screen. His skin was the rough weight of canvas. Those things he showed me flickered on his flesh like a tide of luminescent fish, like lapping tongues of fire, without the images changing him. The trick to the screen is how often it can be used by light, how it takes in nothing of the picture, film leaving no film on his torso. I never learned what projected those stories. If you could dissect him on a table, would you find the apparatus? Some halide lights in a row under the liver, or 2 angler fish in his belly, each with an eye turned towards a rib? Or did he pull with some gravity or magnet the force of light or iron to him, so that his tales were mapped onto him like fleeting tattoos? I learned to desire that jagged flick of shadows under his skin. Lay at night in motel beds, watching the ceiling, how the images cast up a cold residue that looked like the surface of gray water we slept beneath. One of the other things that I found out about, well, at least this version of failure, I think I started thinking of him as this malevolent force because I was sort of grappling with just failure, period. Seems bad. He's going to be a villain. And my character ended up having a lot of sort of tender feelings to him, and as I learned more about his trickster qualities, it just seemed like he was more curious than he was malevolent. And there started being sort of all of these experiments that, like, the failure that he creates is much more him trying these various things out. And so I'm going to read you one of these, which is what he does with motel soap, using a fleshing machine. Failure took to building miniatures, carving from soap bars, first barges, then on their backs, the spines of skyscrapers, factories, railroads, and airports. On some bars, a military in formation. In others, industrial complexes with tiny boardrooms. By the end of a month, his sculptures were so detailed, so resonant with form, that when we bent so our eyes were level with the water, we could watch them be launched, an armada of empire slowly exiting the horizon of sight. We would stay there, hunched, until the ships began to dissolve and sink. A whole fleet of capitalism in soap scum at the bottom of the tubs and pools of every motel from here to Reno. Because the narrator is obsessed with climate change, she's also obsessed with Antarctica, where she's never been. And so in this, she's telling Failure about a trip that she didn't take and using a lot of the Werner Herzog film, The Encounters at the End of the World. So you may recognize the first part of this poem if you've seen that. And there's 2 coupled poems. Failure tends to fall asleep at the wheel to the slight rocking on the sea of macadam. To keep him from this, to keep his eyes open, I tell him stories of the trip to Antarctica the corpse and I did not make. I begin with the vast claustrophobia of nothing in every direction, how my eyes became attuned to the smallest jog of ice, to the echo of seals under my feet pulsating against my ear when I lowered my head to the ground. The air is as dry as a desert, bones strewn above the immutable starred surface. Corpse played a scientist studying an iceberg bigger than this country. If you want to understand a view of God, then this is the scale the infinite works on. Nothing grows above the surface, even though it's made of water. And so, and still, I hauled 6 large branches of a tree to plant there. I upended them, Failure, on the tundra and buried them, so that from a distance they appear to be something that has died. I did it solely to taunt the land. I did it to underscore God's waste. Antarctica Redux. Failure says his ancestors have owned that property for many years. If you watch it, he says, you can see their ideas moving beneath it, releasing bit by bit the water into the water. And then I'll read one more. So Failure and the narrator end up spending, I think I said, a lot of the time in the book trying to bury the corpse, and they're finally successful. And then the narrator's kind of trying to figure out how to mark this in some way. And so this is a list of memorials. Death appears and stuffs the body with mothballs. I plant snow globes across the yard in winter. Snow presses on the glass until they break. Military uniforms folded like the ceremonial flag, triangles cased in black. Pack what you wish to save in the salt of the sea, each organ in a drawer of the card catalog, a card catalog filled with the typing of his name. Write his biography in sugared ink and leave the manuscript in a field for ants, who will eat away the letters so light breaks through. With twine, string 100 golden hens across the telephone wire above the street to twirl in the wind, blinking. Douse the wall of light bulbs in gasoline and strike the match to release their shining. And then I think I'll read two newer poems. Ryan had mentioned that it's interesting when you have kids that all the cliches that everybody's told you are suddenly really true and they feel really meaningful, but people have been telling them to you for years. So there's sort of that, okay, yes, I'm having the same experience that everybody else has, but I too suddenly feel newly mortal and I have no time. And anyway, so this is a poem about our daughter and I don't know if you've seen books where they have sort of puppets attached to books, but we have a book that's a nest with a little bird in it. Zadie puts her hand inside a bird in the book, an empty space waiting for her, made of fabric, and her hand becomes the bird's organs, its impulse to movement, its flutter and jerk. This is her getting inside of things, the mechanics of her own legs as she shuffle, crawls after objects. What exquisite pain to be inside of a body you cannot control with thought or habit. What good training for death when God comes back down to put his hand back inside our bodies. Yeah, so that's cheery. Like, that's what being a new parent is like. You know, it's toddlers, there's all these cute things around you, and you're thinking about death. It's great. And then I've never read this a lot, so we'll see how this goes, but this is the last poem. And this came from, weirdly, a play with a quote by Carl Sandburg. Prayer. Lay on me on the anvil, O God, a famine of wood. Tamp down in the ash of the chimney, cover in soot my genitals, lay down the heft of your body, a mushroom cloud, a haunch of lava, bury my house in ash, bury my head in earth, send vultures against my flesh, let their beaks wear me away. Carry, O Lord, carry, my Lord, disease, dis-ease, the rats scatter over the earth, the pigeons, the deer, lay in my bones glass cullet, in the gullet of me your stones and claws, with your feathered tail brush embers over the fields, ignite brush, smother ants, tangle briars in your horns, with barbed wire cover your flesh, and roll deftly upon us. Crush delicately the tibia and femur, lay a rifle over the felled corpse, hood and drag me, swan and ravish me. When you fling your low light over the charred world, let the burn fall heavy in our houses. Lay down your body like an anvil. Lay down with, then upon us. Thank you.